Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News, and ahead of the Montreal Grand Prix, Mercedes believe that their car might suit this track better than it did in Baku, but the FIA regardless have decided to step in here and say that look, if your car is bad, if your car is bouncing, if it's porpoising too much, you have to fix that in the interest of driver safety, as opposed to sacrificing it for performance, saying that if you don't, you will get penalised. What does this mean for Mercedes and other teams, and also what does it mean for Red Bull? Will they just walk away with the rest of this championship? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Really upset the channel, thank you very much indeed for doing that one. Everyone's arriving this weekend. Questions actually about whether the rain is going to arrive. There are kind of rumours right now, at least looking at the forecast, it might rain on Saturday. We shall see, because often we say, okay, it's going to rain, and then it never does, even though in Monaco it most certainly did. So we'll see if anything like that happens this weekend. First of all, key piece of news from yesterday, the Australian Grand Prix extended incredibly until 2035 in Melbourne, right? I'm pretty sure Sydney were trying to make a grab for it, but yes, we'll be racing in Melbourne for the next, 13 years. Kind of incredible actually to think about the fact that they're doing deals this long term. Who has any idea what the world is going to look like in 10 years time, right? So look, they're signing these incredibly long term deals at this point. They want to keep Melbourne around. It's a good track. It's certainly a good track, I think, to start the season at. It's nothing incredible, but hopefully we can get back to starting the season. I think it's a nice season opener. This year, of course, Bahrain was first, but that's going to be around for the next 12 years. So that's kind of incredible. Now, some teams are certainly looking to bring in some upgrade packages. Williams are one of them. They believe they're bringing a significant upgrade package into these upcoming rounds because they looked quite good early on. I'm pretty sure it was Australia that Albon managed to do that entire race in the hard tyres, right, and bringing in P10, I think, in the end, and then in Imola, I think he was P9. He's only had a P9, I think, so far this season, but since then they've kind of fallen off the pace a fair bit, and they're looking to actually bring what they're calling, or what is being called, a visibly different car. So I wonder if they're going to do an Aston Martin here, where they look at the Red Bull, or they look at a Ferrari or something, and effectively copy and paste and say, oh no, this is a B car we had in the works for the entire season. I kind of doubt they're going to do that, but they believe, well, at least it is being rumoured right now, that they're going to bring a visibly different car to the upcoming races. So we shall see. Of course, at the bottom of the championship standings right now, Aston Martin have seemingly made a step with their new car. Vettel had a phenomenal P6 this weekend. Could have even done better, I'm pretty sure, if not for that spin right. Who knows what would have happened in that race, because that car was pretty decent in a straight line as well. And they're also expected to bring in a more important upgrade package for the British Grand Prix. So who knows if it'll look even more like the Red Bull, or whether they're going to make some other tweaks as well. But pretty sure, their plan is for Canada, they're going to have pretty much the same thing as they had this last weekend. Obviously, it makes sense, right? When there's a double header, you're not really going to change your car between the races. But for Silverstone, Aston Martin are looking to bring a further upgrade package, right? They're certainly moving up the midfield right now. Haas started out the season pretty strong. They've dropped back as expected. Williams maybe in a similar manner. Aston Martin's starting to move through the field here, right? And Vettel especially seems to be getting a lot out of that car, as of course did Alonso in the Alpine. So the battle in the midfield is rather exciting. Norris, of course, and Riccardo in the McLarens. They did a pretty good job also in Baku, but not the results they were looking for there. Mercedes seemingly, still in no man's land at the present time. Now, speaking of Mercedes, actually, Williams, as a kind of a constructor, are looking to potentially switch to Renault power for 2023. This, of course, came after some significant talk at the start of the season. The fact that the Mercedes power unit was significantly down on power compared to their rivals this year compared to previous years. Talk about the fact that there's their 5% or 10% or whatever it is, E10 kind of biosustainable or whatever they call it, fuel in the tanks now, that Mercedes maybe haven't adapted to quite as well as the Ferrari or the Red Bull powertrains the Honda engine has. Now, of course, the Ferrari engine doesn't really seem to last the test of time, but according to the numbers, from what we know, the Ferrari engine is the most powerful. Then you've got Red Bull just behind that, then Mercedes just behind that, and then the Renault engine. So I'm pretty sure the Renault engine is the weakest of the lot, technically, according to the pure numbers, from at least the rumours that we've heard. So interesting, Williams would want to switch to them, but of course it could be part of the whole agreement with Alpine to go for Piastri next season, because of course Alpine want to have a reasonable relationship here. Okay, you can get Piastri on loan from us, from our we want to keep Alonso and Ocon, but also in exchange, you'll have Renault power, this type of stuff. And that apparently might well be going down. Now, just before we talk about the fact that Mercedes believe that this weekend should be better for them than Baku was, the FIA have actually decided to step in here and actually say themselves, look, fix the porpoising or the bouncing problems, or we will effectively penalise you or fix it for you, or whatever you want to do. So the FIA has stepped in, as Chris Medland just pointed out, and issued a technical directive to reduce porpoising on safety grounds. Of course, it's rather interesting, the whole bouncing up and down phenomenon, because Mercedes say that the porpoising, they've got rid of the vertical kind of acceleration that is described. So apparently, based on the car's vertical acceleration, that will give a quantitative limit of the acceptable level of vertical oscillations. So if your car is vertically oscillating too much, i.e. porpoising too much, we will effectively have a limit on that you can't breach, so that, you don't destroy your drivers. Now, I'm not necessarily sure the teams are all going to agree on this or be happy about this, because I think the Mercedes would say, well, actually, actually it's not our porpoising that's causing the issues, it's more about the bouncing on the surface of the track that's causing these oscillations. But the FIA have said, look, you guys figure it out yourselves effectively. We're making sure that it can't be above a certain level or it's going to harm the health of the drivers. They basically decided to step in based on a consultation with its doctors in the interest of the safety of the drivers. Saying like, yeah, the drivers are at risk here if we allow Baku to happen again. Therefore, we're going to prevent that actually happening again by ensuring the teams that will keep to a certain level of bouncing. And if there's any bouncing or porpoising above a certain level, we will effectively penalize them or whatever. Saying that like, okay, you guys have got to raise the right heights, you got to do whatever, do what it takes to prevent this being the case, whatever that means for the actual speed of your car, let's just say. As they say right here, they've decided that in the interest of safety, it is necessary to intervene to require that the teams make the necessary adjustments to reduce or eliminate this phenomenon. Now, of course, what this means is that the FIA is setting out what it believes to be an acceptable level in order to protect the drivers. Teams will have to meet the requirements or be penalized, so it's forcing them to change if needed rather than leaving it up to them. This, of course, kind of being the key point here, because some teams, likely, well, notably Red Bull, who don't really seem to have these issues, are obviously going to be loving life right now, right? Because the FIA has basically said, Red Bull, they've done a good job, congratulations, you get to go away scot-free. All the other teams have to now change, instead of because Mercedes effectively, and other teams as well, were pretty much and admitted to doing so, sacrificing driver safety with the intention of performance. Whereas Red Bull don't necessarily have to do that to the same degree, if at all. Therefore, the other teams are now going to have to start sacrificing performance in the interest of driver safety, which makes sense, but it also probably means the Red Bull arguably get to just drive away at the head of the championship this season because they're not changing the rules to suit any of the other teams. Probably is a fair way to deal with this whole problem, all things considered, but it does mean there is a significant likelihood of Red Bull just dominating the rest of this championship, right? So we'll just see how this goes. Let's talk about Mercedes, right? So this past weekend, every week after the races, they do a kind of nice little debrief, talking about what happened, understanding, at least from their point of view, what was going wrong. They said a few interesting things. The fact that Lewis, when he said his kind of back was cold or the seat was getting cold, they reckon that was actually numbness from the kind of pain he was getting in his back, that his back felt cold, despite the fact that the seat actually had nothing wrong with it. It was just, he was getting pretty numb after all the impacts that he was having down the straights here, right? And they agreed themselves that, look, they can't push the drivers that far in the future. They crossed the line there in terms of the setup of the car that was, of course, they're going to try and make the FIA change some rules around that seemingly other teams have shut down over these last couple of days, but also, they're also going to say, okay, look, we probably can't do that to our drivers anymore. We've got to make this a little bit more reasonable, given the fact that they were, clearly at the end of the day, still the third best team. They believe that in Montreal, they might have a little bit of a better luck. Far from guaranteed, of course, because we heard, a fair bit from the Mercedes camp after Barcelona, wow, okay, we're back in the fight. We're going to be pushing on here, at all these different tracks, it might start favouring us again. All of a sudden, after Baku, it's a very different story indeed. So who knows? They believe that the kind of significant gap that they had back from, the front runners in Baku is going to come back maybe to, I think they're probably hoping to be 6 or 7 tenths behind. That would be pretty good for Mercedes as it currently stands. So they believe that they can get more in that ballpark. And of course, if you're that far behind in qualifying, the Mercedes have a pretty good race car. That's pretty much what it was right in Spain. The Mercedes were about 6-7 tenths back in quali, but in race pace, they were maybe 3 tenths back there or thereabouts, which does give you the chance to fight for, leads and podiums and stuff like that, depending on how other things happen. So they believe they can get more in the fight. This is what James Vowles has to say.
What's clear, though, is going forward for the remainder of the season, this isn't where we want to be. This isn't where we expect it to be. And we have developments in the pipeline that we believe will make steps. I don't think there's going to be one single step that suddenly resolves this, but I do believe that we're a strong enough entity and a strong enough team that we will claw back and put ourselves back in the hunt sometime this season. Every track we go to, we are learning a tremendous amount about this car. And Barcelona, for all intents and purposes, was really, to us, a new car. We didn't expect perhaps to drop back as much as we did in Baku, but that provided a platform to learn from. Montreal isn't going to be substantially different to the last 2 races. I think we'll still have a package that isn't at the front on merit. Red Bull and Ferrari will still be the benchmark that we have to compare ourselves to. I think, though, that the large gap you saw in qualifying in Baku perhaps won't be that big in Montreal. It'll be back down from where it was. And as we go through all the races from then onwards, I'm fairly sure we'll find small steps and developments that push us back towards the front.
So even though Mercedes believe that Montreal kind of suits their car a bit better than Baku did, and they should be closer to the front than they were this past weekend in Azerbaijan, Kevin Magnussen doesn't necessarily agree, because generally we've seen that Montreal has been a relatively bumpy track. He says in this article right here that it could be, a pretty bumpy track. Bouncing should be expected, as it was in Azerbaijan, and we've seen what happens to the Mercedes, at least this new version of Mercedes, since the porpoising has been dialed out. But the bouncing and basically the suspension bouncing around down to the floor does not seem to be helping them at all. The bottoming out of the car effectively was what was being discussed massively in Baku, and drivers seem to believe that it's effectively going to be the same story here, expecting Montreal to be very bumpy, a potential repeat of Azerbaijan. We saw the same thing pretty much in Monaco, right, where the car's bouncing around all over the place, not really the porpoising effect, but just the way that car is designed, just that, well, it seems a real tricky beast to get a handle on, right? So a lot of drivers, Magnussen especially, saying really, is the Mercedes going to be that much better? Definitely, don't expect that much improvement from a lot of the drivers' perspective, but for some reason, James Vowles and Mercedes seemed pretty confident that this weekend will be better for them, right? And who knows how Silverstone will behave as well when we get there in a couple of weeks' time. A few other things on this matter as well. Gasly mentioned the fact that F1 drivers will have to avoid Montreal's curbs in these new cars. Norris is talking about the fact that McLaren's gains, hoping that they appear at all the tracks, because they've certainly made some progress. I think they were talking about the fact that they discovered something in Riccardo's car that was either different to Norris's or something that was kind of throwing him off or making him perform worse. And I think even Riccardo said himself, okay, the pressure from the team is definitely spurring me to be better. He got a good result last weekend, beat Lando in the end. Maybe he wouldn't have done if Norris was allowed to pass him, but I think probably did the right thing, given kind of how Riccardo got, if anything, screwed over a bit with the strategy earlier on in the race. So looking forward, hopefully, to Riccardo's fight back through the rest of the season, but I still think Norris is a phenomenal driver in that McLaren right now, and this is the track layout here in Montreal. Now, interestingly enough, actually, the DRS zones here are especially interesting. Sector 1, pretty technical Sector 1. Sector 2 is at this one big straight, one little chicane type thing, and then going down into the very tight turn 10 for the start of Sector 3. But have a look at this, right? So we've got the DRS detection zones before turn 6, and then after turn 7, that's when you get a bit of DRS down here with the kind of back straight on Sector 2. But then at the detection zone here, the second one is for the entirety of the 2 DRS zones on the back straight. This is actually it's very interesting, right? Because let's say I'm coming out of turn 8, turn 9, I'm right behind you, I managed to send a move down the inside into turn 10, but I'm behind you crucially at the detection zone, but because I'm so close here, I managed to send a move down the inside, let's just say. Because I was behind a DRS detection zone 2, and I'm now ahead going into these DRS zones, I actually, despite being ahead of you, will still get DRS, right? It's kind of interesting that this detection zone isn't, for example, here, like outside of turn 11, what they're calling a turn, but it's obviously in the F1 cars, not really a turn, or like before the corner. But being back here does mean that all the way to the end of effectively the new lap, you're going to get the DRS detection zone is still going to be relevant all that time later, right? So very interesting how this is going to work out in the race. I think it does create the potential for a lot of passes, right? Like just the way these DRS zones are laid out back to back, like lots of straights here, of course. I think with these new cars, it could be a very exciting circuit, actually. Definitely a great circuit already. Plenty of exciting moments over the years, and I just feel like the way these DRS detection zones are laid out, the fact that if you're behind at this point, well, within a second, then you will get DRS all the way down to turn 1 of the next lap, right? Regardless of the situation. So I think it will definitely create an interesting dynamic to keep your eyes on over the weekend. And just as we mentioned at the start of the video, the rumour has it, or at least the indication is from the weather reports, that it might well be raining in qualifying in Montreal. That's at least there were some indications here that it might be raining on Saturday. So we shall see if any of that actually comes to reality. And just to mention this, of course, to finish out the video, we haven't even raced in Canada for several years at this point. 2019 was the last time we raced there. Unfortunate scenes, really. But in the last 15 years or so of actually racing there, there's only ever been 3 drivers that have been on pole position. Lewis Hamilton was on pole in 2007 and won the race for his maiden victory. He was on pole in 2008, 2010 as well. Then Sebastian Vettel on pole for a few years. Nico Rosberg, the one kind of outlier on this list. But yeah, in recent times, it's pretty much only been those 3 guys that have ever been on pole since 2007, at least at this track. So kind of incredible stuff. You'd imagine, though, we're going to get a new pole sit at this weekend unless Rosberg's monster antibodies somehow get him back in an F1 car and take him to pole. But very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, as always. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.